There we go. So we're now recording. So good evening to those of you that are watching this on repeat or whatever the inHope version of iPlayer is. It's good to be with you this evening. As I said earlier, this evening's session is entitled Hunger in the Wilderness. And the whole series is based on Matthew chapter 4 and that journey that Jesus took when he went into the wilderness, led by the Spirit for fasting, for prayer, to prepare himself for the ministry that was ahead of him. One of the biggest understatements, I think, in the whole of the New Testament is in Matthew 4, where Jesus, having fasted for 40 days, he had gone without eating for 40 days, Matthew says, and then finishes by saying he was hungry. And I'm probably not really that surprised. That's quite a lot of time to go without eating. Tonight we'll reflect a little bit around what that sense of hunger is, what the practice of fasting is, and how God can use that and how God does use that to sustain us in challenging times. Like I said, we'll hear a little bit from the South and East Bristol Foodbank, from Andy and from Beth, who will talk about the issue of hunger in Bristol and the hope that we can bring to the people who are trapped in the wilderness of poverty and hunger. We'll have time for open prayer at the end. I will stop recording at that point, so your prayers are not going to be recorded. But we'll have time to pray for all the work at the end. But I want to start, if it's okay, with an attitude of worship. And Jeff has very kindly offered to read Psalm 63, or the first 8 verses of it for us. So over to you, Jeff.
Better unmute. Psalm 63, a psalm of David in the wilderness. Oh God, you are my God, and I long for you. My whole being desires you. Like a dry, worn out and waterless land, my soul is thirsty for you. Let me see you in the sanctuary. Let me see how mighty and glorious you are. Your constant love is better than life itself. And so I will praise you. I will give you thanks as long as I live. I will raise my hands to you in prayer. My soul will feast and be satisfied, and I will sing glad songs of praise to you. As I lie in bed, I remember you. All night long I think of you, because you have always been my help. In the shadow of your wings, I sing for joy. I cling to you, and your hands keep me safe.
Bless you. Thank you, Jeff. I wonder what comes to your mind when you think about fasting during Lent. What images, what thoughts, what feelings come to mind when you consider the possibility of fasting? What sort of things do you think about giving up? We resisted the urge to have a chat to see what people had given up for Lent. But the typical things are kind of around chocolate or television or social media. People give up all sorts of things for Lent. If I'm honest, the first Sunday of Lent, pretty much every year, is a panic for me, because we're already 4 or 5 days into Lent, and I go to church or Zoom church nowadays, knowing that people will ask what I've given up for Lent, and in all honesty, I'd probably forgotten that I was meant to give something up. So I kind of rack my brain quickly through all the things that I've eaten over the last kind of 48 hours since Ash Wednesday, and kind of think a little bit about what I haven't given up yet, and choose something that I wouldn't mind giving up, and that therefore becomes my option. So probably not the kind of considered, thought through process that perhaps it should be. But the prospect of giving up food terrifies me sometimes, and giving up food or certain foods for Lent terrifies me. How can I go without snacks all through an afternoon? How can I go without meals? Who's going to eat the chocolate biscuits out the jar if I'm not there to take on that responsibility? Or more seriously, how will I be able to keep my focus, keep my energy levels up, do all the things I'm meant to do, my work, my job, my family? How am I meant to do all of that when I haven't had a meal or have gone without food? And I guess that's probably the point of Lent, the point of fasting, the point of giving stuff up, that we kind of develop that dependency upon God. This year, I've been looking at how countries around the world mark Lent, and how whilst they might fast, they also use food in other ways to give up Lent. And here's a few of my favourites. Until recently, Lent and other fasts in the Greek Orthodox calendar meant that the Greeks would go up to 6 months in a year without eating meat, the Orthodox ones. Traditionally, Lent would extend from what I think is the brilliantly named Smoky Thursday, the day where all the remaining meats in the house would be eaten, and that would last until Holy Saturday. And during the intervening 40 days, consumption of red meat, eggs, milk, animal byproducts, even fish with the backbone, eating those were prohibited, all until Holy Saturday, when a lamb or a kid would be eaten. Similarly, in the Czech Republic, Christians would traditionally mark Maundy Thursday as Green Thursday by only eating spinach or salad. And a strict fast would be observed on Green Thursday, again, not eating meat. The only complete meal would be meatless, but they'd be allowed to snack on kind of green things, on salad, on spinach, on vegetables, all sorts of things. The word grün or green, the German name for the day, i.e. Grün Donnerstag, literally means Green Thursday, but it doesn't derive from the name of the colour. Rather, it is a corruption of the word greenen, which means to weep. So there's that sense of Maundy Thursday kind of reflecting that weeping and the attitude with which people would come to God. And then I think my favourite one from around the world is La Samaritana, which is in Mexico. The fourth Friday in Lent, it's traditional to celebrate La Samaritana, the day of the Good Samaritan, which, slightly confusingly, is not anything to do with the Good Samaritan, but rather it's a reenactment of the story of the woman at the well and her feeding or providing Jesus with something to drink. Big pots of flavoured water are filled up and decorated. You can kind of see the pictures, the colour, the vibrancy, and they're kind of wrapped with paper and arches of palms added with flowers all over the place. And from these pots, the people will give to passers-by, to strangers, just flavoured water or ice cream, just kind of as a kind of a reenactment of that Samaritan woman giving Jesus water. So Lent's recognised like differently all over the world. I'm sure that you know kind of others. And through all the variations around the world, there's something significant and something important about food and the kind of traditions and the rituals around food that enable people to encounter God and to share his goodness. Fasting is that self-imposed ritual whereby people give something up so that they can make room to encounter God, a self-imposed wilderness, if you will. This ritual, this practice, this discipline helps us as we seek to align our wills to his. It's a ritual that means that when we go through life's actual wildernesses, and I don't necessarily just mean the pandemic, but all the other troubles that we kind of encounter in our lives, the other wildernesses, the other dark places, we have trained ourselves and are ready and prepared to walk with God alongside us. We know where to find him. But of course, whilst the spiritual disciplines of Lent and the principles that underpin them are really important as part of our spiritual journey and are helpful in helping us through the wilderness, we were reminded last week of the two-sided nature of this hope. We heard last week a passage from Isaiah where God made certain promises to his people. But the other side of the deal was that they needed to share that hope with others. If they did away with oppression and spent themselves on behalf of the hungry, then God would satisfy their needs and be with them as they rebuilt Jerusalem. So we're going to hear today from earlier on in that chapter. Jonathan's going to read to us in a second, but about what sort of fasting does God look for. We're going to hear that passage before we move on and hear. We're going to play a video from the Trussell Trust, and then we're going to hand over to Andy Irwin and Beth from the Foodbank team, who are going to talk to us about their work and what it means to share food with the hungry and to set the oppressed free. Like I said at the start, feel free to put any questions in the chat. Andy would love to answer various questions and has room for that at the end. So I'm going to hand over to Jonathan first, who's going to read Isaiah 58 verses 1 to 9 to us.
Okay, so hopefully you can hear me. As was said, Isaiah 58, very familiar verses for us. Shout it aloud, do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their rebellion, and to the house of Jacob their sins. For day after day they seek me out. They seem eager to know my ways, as if they were a nation that does what is right and has not forsaken the commands of its God. They ask me for just decisions. They seem eager for God to come near them. Why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves, and you have not noticed? Yet on the day of your fasting, you do as you please. You exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife, and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is this the kind of fast I have chosen? Only a day for a man to humble himself? Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed, and for lying on sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice, to untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free, and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry, and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe him, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, here I am.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan. So Natalie's going to share a video now from the Trussell Trust that kind of sets the scene for the things that Andy's going to be talking about in a second.
I've worked all my life and I never thought I'd be in the situation whereby I needed a food bank. However, going there, it's not people that are unemployed, it's not people that are scroungers, it's not people that need to get a job. There's probably one person in your street at least that's had to go and use a food bank. People are struggling and they need help. My name's Richard Brown, 49 from New Milton in Hampshire. Last year I had to go to a food bank for the first time in my life due to losing my job, ongoing health problems, and also domestic issues, splitting up with my partner. When I first went to the food bank, I felt very embarrassed. Having been brought up in a forces background, I'd always looked after myself. However, on meeting people there, they put me at ease straight away. I even got a cup of tea. I'd never expected to use a food bank, but it wasn't until I was put into that situation that I realised that I actually needed help myself. I went to the Citizens Advice and asked them what I can do, what help there was, and they referred me to the food bank. I do have a 10-year-old daughter as well. It makes it more difficult, but it's a case of trying to budget or having to go without. There's been situations where I will feed her instead of feeding myself. You know, it does get a bit hard, but just something you have to do to survive. I think if the food bank had not been there, I don't know what I would have done. Due to my health problems, that would have had a serious effect, which could possibly have led me to a stay in hospital. But without the food bank, I don't think I'll be here today. I think that may have, pushed me over the edge, as I think it will do for a lot of people if it's not there.
So I'm going to introduce Andy and Beth. You can probably just work out which one's which. Andy is the manager for the South and East Foodbank, and Beth is one of the support workers that works as part of the team. So I'm going to hand over to Andy and let him take it from here.
That's great. Thank you, Steve. Oh, well, hello, everybody. It's great to be joining you this evening. I kind of watched that video and I kind of felt like God was smiling, actually, not because of someone's circumstances, but because, you know, when I think of Britain, I think of what's going on with food banks and the generosity of people. I do kind of, you know, I think we are slowly untying those cords of injustice just by caring for people when they hit a hard patch. And I kind of see it the other way around as well. I kind of see it that it's a good thing that we are caring for people when they hit rock bottom, really. I was asked to talk a little bit about 3 or 4 things. I think the first one was what it's been like in the pandemic. I mean, for everybody, this last year or so has been very, very difficult. And anyone who's had to carry on working knows that the amount of change and changing the way you work, changing how you do it, changing whether you're at home or not has been really tiring. And I know that's been very difficult across a lot of different professions. And the food bank's been no different. I think back in March 2020, in fact, I remember Andy Street sending me an email right in the middle of when I was doing a whole load of other things, telling me that there was this very important meeting at the council and that I needed to be there, you know, pronto. And me just thinking, look, I've got an audit coming out. Just I'm sure your meeting will be great. Enjoy it. I've got things to do, thanks. And I sent Sally along, and then I had this sort of backwards and throwing with Andy Street with emails, with me getting more and more sort of frustrated with his demands. And little did I know what was coming. I mean, fortunately, he did. I think it was in March. We were sitting there with a newish warehouse, 12 tons of food, full warehouse, and doing really well. And we'd got it sorted, and feeling that we'd achieved, you know, quite a lot, really. And hey, things ain't too bad. And then roll on 4 more weeks, and we've got an empty warehouse. The supermarkets aren't letting anybody buy any food bar 3 items per thing. I mean, you'll remember back to those days. And just this sense of, how am I going to get the food to feed what was becoming an avalanche of we had a new, you know, everybody was sending us email referrals rather than the little red vouchers, because we weren't doing that anymore. And we were getting an avalanche of people getting referred to us. And I hadn't got a clue where to get the food, to be honest with you. I remember driving up to the large Asda up in Patchway, because they had a sort of like a wholesale operation next to their big store. And that was one of the only places you could buy 5 out of about 20 or 25 products in bulk. So I'd sort of take the van up, buy about 7 or 8 very large trolleys. They had extra large trolleys full of 5 or 6 products. I think there was apple juice was one of them. And throwing it in this van and driving down thinking, this will last a week. And it isn't everything. And it was, and then we've had people turning up at the doors of all the outlets in en masse, some people panicking with whether they were going to get their food, people not knowing how to distance from each other, and people without vouchers crossing over other people and breathing on them, and then we thought, we can't operate like this, so we're going to have to deliver the food. How the heck are we going to do it? And there was so many help prayers that went up at that time for those 4 or 5 months. I think you know, whatever movie you like, whether it's the you know, you're stuck on a deserted island, you've been, you know, marooned on an island, and you're writing SOS for a ship that's coming, or you're you know, you've broken your leg, or your mate's broken his leg on the side of a mountain, and you need the air ambulance to turn up, or you're being shot at by other people and you need the cavalry. Whatever your movie of choice, it was like that for about 4 or 5 months, to be honest with you. And it really was very exhausting. And, and the cavalry came, British Gas turned up, Kingswood Community Transport turned up and delivered all of our parcels for about 3 months or so. We had money coming in from all over the place. Everything from very generous individuals to a business. I got the Swiss watch company. I think Steve, I sent him a few emails of people who were sending us money, thinking, who are the Swiss watch company from London, saying, would you like $5,000? And then we had to start buying food. So we'd never bought food really before. So I think it was Andy Street organised this thing with the Noise Group to get lorries order lorry loads of food from Morrison. So we were ordering lorries, getting volunteers to sort of unpack lorries food. It was just bizarre. God provided. God really answered all of those prayers all the way along the line, and I'm just very, very thankful for his generosity. I think he's kept us at a time when we've been right at the edge in ourselves, and yet somehow it also got stronger because of that. So I'm very grateful to him for what he's done. I think it knocked us out of certain habits and ways of working that we thought we were limited with. And I'm sure that some people have found that they found sort of resources with themselves, with God, that has allowed them to be adaptable. I feel so much more adaptable now than I ever was. It's strange. I really thought, that's my limit. That's where I'll go. That's about it. And it's like God has said, hey, you're going to have to change. and I've really enjoyed that and endured that in both. But I really appreciate it overall. So one of the things that again, another element of the generosity of what we've received over the last few months rather, has been that there have been various grants that have come up that have allowed us to, along with some of the extra money that people have donated, have allowed us to employ more staff. So we've gone from a team of 2 to a team of 7 in the matter of a few months. And Beth and Emma are 2 support workers who were supported by money that's been supplied by Stewardship, the Christian charity in London. Again, through Andy Street. He's getting a lot of mentions today. And we've also employed a second advice worker as well to deal with debts. So we applied for a grant to help people who might have to come out of furlough or just need debt support. So we've now got 2 advice workers. So we've kind of got this sort of kind of more than food team that's been developed. And I thought I'd ask Beth, has volunteered very kindly to come along and just share a story of someone you've helped in the middle of not really being able to connect very easily with people. So over to you, Beth.
Okay. When I saw that the topic was in the wilderness, so I was thinking through all my clients and I came up with one who I really felt that had been in the wilderness and still is to a point, but so I'll just be reading his story. I hope you don't mind. Stephen is a man in his 50s. He grew up in a children's home where he was physically and sexually abused. He became involved in crime and was in prison on and off for 14 years. He developed multiple mental health disorders and was admitted to a mental health facility. Upon release, he was housed in temporary accommodation hostel where he was attacked and robbed. He lost his belongings and ID documents and was moved to another hostel for his own safety. This is where I met Stephen when he applied for a food bank parcel. We got talking and he told me his story. He was in the position of having no idea what benefits he could be claiming. He had very little income. He didn't know how to register with a GP, and he was dealing with isolation and fear for his future. We were able to sort out his benefits situation, advise how to get access to medical help, and some counselling. He has since applied for PIP, which is independence allowance, and he is awaiting a decision on that. He is now on a waiting list for council housing, but hopes that he may at some point be able to privately rent. Stephen and I email or text weekly, or when he needs some encouragement or just to chat. He's a highly intelligent, well-read man. He read Plato and Ulysses in prison. He genuinely wants to get his life back on track. Foodbank has been able to offer him more than food and get him some guidance and support to do that. And he no longer uses Foodbank.
Mm. Oh, that's brilliant, Beth. Thank you for that. I think one of the things that we've joined something that Trussell set up, and I was involved with helping them work that out, I suppose, over a couple of years, something called the Pathfinder Project. And I think what we're trying to do is basically, we want to see people not really needing a food bank anymore. I think that's probably the simplest way. Some people have put it that to end the need for food banks. I kind of think I see it as a little bit more personal than that. We want to see people able to stand on their own 2 feet or stand within the community and get away from feeling isolated and powerless. And so we're on a kind of journey to do that. And one of the areas that we're probably ahead of a lot of the 420 odd food banks there are is in this area of support and advice, and particularly sort of current budget kind of support or debt and income maximization as well. So we're going to press forward a lot more with that. It's been very difficult. I think, actually, I mean, Beth has been remarkably good at connecting with people when actually I think it's very difficult, so one of the things we've managed to do recently is get the team vaccinated through adult social services approval, which means that I think in about 3 weeks' time, we're going to start opening up and allowing small numbers of people to come in and actually see the more than food workers. And that's going to make a massive difference to how we work with them, or we hope it will. And one of the things that we really wanted prayer for was for that process. We've started this operation in South Bristol with Counterslip Baptist Church, St Paul's in BS3, and the 2 vineyard churches, Seven Vineyard in particular, for serving BS4. And I think another thing we really want to praise, but first of all, in the first instance, that we're able to work with the people who need the food bank more closely. So if you can pray for those people that I guess the motivation will be there for them to be able to believe that change can happen. I think that's a very difficult thing to do when you've been almost, we've all been sort of almost told we can't do anything for about a year now. And I think that has an effect on people's psyche actually, in terms of their ability to make changes. And I think we found that when trying to contact people on the phone and try and do the number of things we can do to help them in that process. So really want to pray for those sorts of things in terms of clients. Sorry, you open up the prayer points. I was interested in what, I thought it was another video. Yeah, so I think we're praying for people who've lost work. I think one of the reasons, I mean, we're kind of expecting the furlough scheme to sort of, we'll find out from the budget tomorrow how much longer that's going to go on for. But as you know, a lot of people have lost work in the retail sector. Debenhams has closed down a number of other projects. So we want to really, there are a number of ways practically we can help people with their current finances and a little bit with debt work. So we just need to be able to hook up with them and connect with them through their connection with the food bank when they come through. I think we're anticipating a lot of people to feel a real sense of loss and of grief and of fear, I guess, in terms of when lockdown comes to an end, and concern about trying to start life again and actually relate to people. I heard someone on the television this morning talking about how they're quite nervous about actually just connecting with other people again. It's a nervy thing. And we've just advertised for a deputy manager for South Bristol to sort of connect with the projects down there and help them to develop into opening and functioning food bank. So if we can pray for those as well, that'd be really helpful. So those 4 things would be really useful to us when we pray at the end for the More Than Food team and their connection with clients, for the people themselves who will come to the food bank, that they'll really be able to open up and embrace the possibility that things can change, for the people's mental health, and coming to terms with the different types of loss that they'll have suffered, whether it's through losing work or losing loved ones, and for the recruitment of two managers really, one at the moment for South Bristol, and our current deputy manager Sally's moving on with a husband who's going to start a new curacy in June. So we will be employing a new East Bristol Foodbank person as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on for me to learn how to manage lots of people. I haven't done it really before, so pray for me to pray for them really. So that would be helpful. Any of those things would be great. I think I'm done, Steve. So yeah, I don't know if people have got questions. I'm not sure, but
I don't think I've seen any questions pop up yet, but I've got one to get the ball rolling. Can you just talk us through a little bit about South Bristol? Because up until recently, you were just the East Bristol Foodbank. Was that because of the pandemic? Was that in the plans beforehand? Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess there were three or four projects, one to be, and three existing projects in South Bristol, who always wanted to get together and be a trustful food bank, but for lots of different reasons couldn't get that together. And for about 2 years, I sat there getting emails saying they were about to start, and they kept not starting. So for some crazy reason, at some point, I said, well, maybe we can help. And then we embarked on about a year or so with Sally going down and just very soft touch, talking to the different members of those food banks and the staff and the leadership teams of churches and other people connected with them, volunteers. And I guess what the pandemic really did was it sparked something. So Seven Vineyard, who were always talking about setting up a food bank, basically said, right, we're in, we'll do a delivery project. And we helped them set up their delivery project into BS4, which was very helpful to us, because a lot of people used to come over from BS4 to us in Easton and in Kingswood. BS3 St Paul's set up their own project with some community projects in BS3, and we went to them and said, well, would you like us to support you? And they said, well, yeah, absolutely. And then that relationship developed to the point where we met with the leadership team there and said, well, look, when the time comes, we'll help you open up an actual outlet in Bedminster, because I think that's a really important place to have a location as well. And Counterslip was one of the original three that wanted to get on board. And we're virtually there. I think I'm meeting again with the church leaders this month just to finalise some bits and pieces. So they've joined us. Another two didn't feel they were ready for it, and I think that they've got both that they may well be in the future, and we'll certainly be supporting them. And hopefully at some point, either one or both of them, I think, will join in as well when they see the real benefits of it. So it's kind of been a bit of planning and a bit of just the way the pandemic's forged things.
Fab. Cool. Any other questions? I can chuck in another one. I haven't seen any pop up.
Yeah.
That's fine. Can you talk us through the I guess the diversity of clients? Do you see all sorts of different needs or different challenges? But yeah, are they all similar? I don't know, you say similar sorts of people, but that sort of, or are they very different?
Well, I wonder if Beth can answer that, because the weird thing for me is the last year, we have not really had the same direct client contact, and which we love, and which is so much better for them. It's a kind of community thing, a food bank, really. So Beth, I don't know, is it a range of people, or is it just one fits all?
Oh, a wide range of people. I mean, from a mum who comes in for the first time in tears because she's embarrassed because she's lost her job, and this is the first time she's ever had to come to food bank, to habitual food bank users who are really pushing their numbers of food bank parcels, who have never worked, have been on benefits, long term, to people with mental health problems, which we're seeing a great deal, people with alcohol or drug dependency. So it's a whole range of different walks of life that I've seen, because I'm in 3 parts of Bristol during the week, and they're all very different. The clientele are quite different. The one I went to today is probably quite English. The one tomorrow is the middle of Eastern, which is a lot of, I guess, Somalis. Andy would be the main nationality there, I'd say. And then on Friday in Fish Ponds, it's a bit of a mix of both. Yeah, a lot of different nationalities and religions, which, you know, all different cultural things come into it as well. So, you know, some people struggle to accepting food, others almost expect it, you know. So you get all different characters and all different, you know, walks of life. That's what I've found anyway. But the common thing is that at the moment they need help. So
yeah. I've certainly seen a number of people like quite a few taxi drivers during the pandemic, which I haven't had before, which mainly because they're just not being needed.
yeah,
They're self-employed, so I've seen quite a few taxi drivers turning up. Had a chef, 2 chefs. Saw a chef a couple of weeks ago and had a bit of a chat with him, who's just basically cooking for his kids at home. He's lost work, so certainly a number of people have lost work, more than I would say normal, as you'd expect, really. So it's a varying theme, and I think, Beth, you're probably seeing people who are probably at the far end of things as well, because that's the support worker's role in some ways.
yeah.
Cool. Thank you. I've got a couple of, 2 or 3 questions that have come direct to me, which is great. I don't know if any have gone directly to Natalie. So hopefully this is a very quick one. Can you tell us how many clients we're working with at the moment? Just give a sense of the scale of what we're doing at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, what I can tell you, I haven't looked up, you know. Yeah, I can do. Let me think. So this year, I think since April, normally in a rolling year from April, the financial year from April through to the end of March, last year we saw about 6,300 people that we fed. This year so far it's about 12,500. So at the moment we're approaching, just going over double what we had last year. I think, not in a good sense, I think for us anyway, the numbers have dropped a little bit more recently. This is more the lull time of the year, although I don't think it's lulled. So tradition, you know, if you like, year on year, this sort of time, the numbers drop a little bit and then they start increasing again. So I think, I don't really keep a rolling tally at the moment. I have the sort of overall yearly figures in my head. But we're getting regular numbers coming to all the food banks at the moment. You know, it's not quiet, but it's not really busy at the moment, which is quite nice. It means that and what we want to do is really focus on this extra work we can do with people and start to bring, you know, 1s or 2s into the food bank a little bit and start to try out some of the extra work we can do with people. I think that's our next step, really. So in some ways, hopefully we can offer better quality of work, because we're not totally inundated with people at the moment.
Another kind of logistical one: do people still need to be referred by doctors or social workers? What's your referral process?
Yeah, in fact, we've gone into a funky new GDPR database referral system, which has been got lots of tweaky things that need doing that have driven us slightly bonkers. But it's basically, so all of the referrers now, so we don't have red vouchers anymore. So nobody gives out a paper voucher to anybody. What we're getting all the referrers to do is to log into our system as referral users, and then literally put a voucher through into our database system. So it's quite clever what Trussell have developed. And then the clients get a code. One of the new things we are doing is phoning everybody up when we get these electronic vouchers and actually asking them more about their needs. And it's worth saying, in the last year, we've added a number of things to what we give as a standard to people, which is quite exciting, which is sort of like washing powders, wash clothes, washing up liquid. We've added various things like deodorants, conditioner on top of shampoo. We've added razors and shaving cream and things like that. So we've tried, and nappies, baby formula, baby milk, and wet wipes and baby shampoo are standards now. So we've expanded the business, but again, we've got warehousing issues coming up as a result of that. And I'm also doing a piece of work with another project to look at specific things we can buy in as a step towards being able to provide decent food for people of other cultures and other heritages. And we really want to make a difference. We've done a little bit more translation work this year, so we're slowly becoming a decent service, but it's a long way to go, I feel. So we're learning new things. But yeah, so everybody's referred by somebody else, and there's the Citizens Advice National Helpline have joined with us as well. So people can just do a free phone number to the Citizens Advice Helpline and get referred direct through that database to us now, and that's getting used quite a lot. So yeah, it's all by referral, but there are quick routes for people to do it, which means that anybody can get a voucher if they need it.
Amazing. Thank you. And then I think a couple more questions that are kind of linked, but I'm going to read them to you separately, and then we'll kind of move into a time of prayer after that. So the first question says that food banks are needed and do great work. That's not a question. But what should we and the church be doing to help prevent people ever needing a food bank? ? And then the second question is, apart from prayer, what can individuals do to help?
Okay, so I think we're on a journey with Trussell to end the need for food banks. So I think prayer is going to be important in that right from the outset, because the things that need to happen in order to change that is basically to start with that people's minds change. And that's going to involve a lot of really good messaging. It's going to involve research. It's going to involve community involvement. I'm talking to the other food banks locally, but about we're all thinking towards bringing messages together that represent the voice of the people that we serve. And we ain't done that before. This is a new thing. What we're used to doing is just saying, oh, we need tinned tomatoes or something. Or, oh, look, so-and-so's come and helped us with the food bank. Well, that doesn't really cut it when it comes to changing opinion. And ultimately, I guess what we really want is a fair and just benefit system, a national wage that means that, and a national benefits and a national wage system where people have enough money to not need a food bank. I mean, there are things that we know are needed. And then there's all the community and social things around mental health, domestic violence, you name it, the reasons why people come to food banks, all of those come into that mix as well. And housing is another big issue. So I think there are some big issues there that we can't deal with all of those by any stretch of the imagination, but we want to try and pick some. And our advice and support work is a part of that small process of experimenting with new ways to help people get on top of finances. But it's a big subject, and we could talk about it. We could sit down with some of you and have a good old natter about that, and change the world together, and then have a pray at the end. I think, yeah. And getting involved, I think we will, when we start opening up. I think that's the time when we'll be looking, particularly for Christians, to come forward and help actually run the food banks as they open up. A number of people, certainly in one or two of our areas, BS3, Eastern. The particular ones, I think, and possibly Counterslip actually, are going to need Christians to help, because a number of our very old Christians who've been there for years have got older, and I think need to put the feet up and have a bit of a life. Actually, being really honest about it. So I think I hope that we'll have a bit of new life in the old dog yet, and yeah. So that's probably my big one, is that that we will actually have people helping again when we start really opening up.
Cool. And having said we were going to pray, I've got another question I want to ask. Sorry.
Can I ask you of God?
Well, you can do. It's a question about God, so he may want to plead the fifth. What role does faith play in all of this? I mean, the series is Hope in the Wilderness. Where does God fit into all the stuff that we're doing with food banks? You talked about practically.
Well, that's really multifaceted. So I think on a very practical level, I am always praying for things for the food bank. So whether it's bigger warehousing, answers to questions of how we're going to do this, and food coming in and other things coming. That's a no-brainer. We're always praying for things. I think, and then there are certain projects that are doing things that just blow my mind. So Fish Ponds Baptist would be a really good example, where they have, as a group, as a community, they have come together, and we actually seen someone from the food bank get baptized this year, which was just lovely, you know, and that's really because of the spirit and nature of that church, and with Richard and Nikki leading it, and some of the community coming together and just spending time with a number of people who either come in, and they've had film clubs for people from the food bank, they've had toddler stuff, you know, that's where the kind of the mixing and relationship and the faith thing comes into play. And that's been, you know, every project's different, so that's been probably the one where I've kind of got really excited. But I've got excited about lots of different things, but that's where I think faith comes into it.
I just thought, can I just butt in there and just, you know, totally biblical thing. Just whenever I'm at food bank and I see people getting food, I just think we're doing this for Jesus. I mean, and it just makes my heart sing to be able to be a little cog in that, you know, that work, you know. So I just see it as an obedience thing. So
brilliant. Well, thank you both of you. That seems like a good point to turn to prayer. So I'm going to stop recording. Thank you to those of you that are listening again. You can see the prayer points from earlier in the recording. So I'm going to stop recording now.